Welcome back, lowercase g's, to the junk room. Today, the big G's gonna tell you about something all kids hate: magazines. Yuck. But if you're over 30, I'm sure. Wait a second. Who the Wampa Nugget are you?
I'm Kaba. Don't mind me, I'm just looking around to make sure I don't see anything a kid might find entertaining.
We ain't got no kid stuff here, G-Dog. Go check out that retro guy. Maybe he has some kid content.
What about this? This thing here. It looks like it's aimed for kids.
That's Larry J. Wampa.
Is he a kid?
He is 1,138 years old.
Are you sure about that? He looks young.
Well, unless you count his mental age. Corn muffin potato. Man, why don't you stop being a narc and do something productive with your life?
Oh well, I don't see any kid content here. But I'll be watching, and I'll be listening.
Ugh, I really don't like Kappa. Anyway, let's get back to the video. Here's the Big G, the Junk Man, to tell you all about Starlog magazine.
Hey, this looks very cartoony. This looks like it's aimed for kids. This is going in my report. There's a few things out there I can really define as shaping my childhood, making me into the junk man that I am today. One, of course, is Star Wars. That's no surprise there. But there's other things, other movies, television shows, and other pop culture things that really made me the nerd that I am today. But today we're going to talk about something that really was an important factor in the whole geek fandom back in the 80s and carried on into the 90s and into the 2000s. Now I will say it also came in the late 70s, so no one in the comment section gets upset. And if you don't know what we're going to talk about already, then you didn't read the title or look at the thumbnail. We're going to talk about Starlog magazine. Oh, great. He's going to talk about a magazine. I wanted to hear about toys. I know that's what you're thinking, and honestly, I said this video is probably not going to do that great, but I can't imagine doing this channel without showing some love to Starlog magazine. I mean, after all, I did show a love making a Starlog shirt. But I really want to do this for the younger people out there. Younger people. What's that? Do you mean kids? No, younger people. Not kids. Not kids. Screw kids. I hate kids. We're not doing this for kids. We're doing this for younger. And when I mean younger, I mean under 40. Or at least under 30. You know, the ones that grew up without magazines or didn't care about magazines because they had the internet. But for kids growing up in the 80s, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have a community where we felt accepted. Nerd culture. We didn't know there was other people as nerdy and geeky about movies, television shows, science fiction, horror films, action figures, whatever it was. The only ones we knew were in that small pocket within our town, if you're lucky to have a group like that. But when you got the latest issue of Starlog magazine, it opened you up to a whole new world that you weren't the only one into this stuff. There were a whole team of writers, publishers, people that made this magazine into it, and it wasn't just those people that made the magazine. I mean, you had a whole section in there listing off upcoming conventions. Most people didn't even know what a convention was unless it came to your town. If it came to a city or state far away, you didn't know anything about it. Chances are, anyway, you didn't know anything about it. They even had ad in this magazine, people looking for pen pals. Now, if you don't know what pen pals are, it's kind of like the Twitter back in the 80s, but instead of writing a text on your phone over an app, you wrote out a long piece of mail, mailed it to someone, and waited about 8 weeks and you got a reply back. Mostly it was, hey, I love Star Wars. I like to watch V the series. Tell me what you like. And they would write back, I like V the series, although I think it's gone downhill since season 1. And I also like The Last Starfighter. What was your favorite movie last year? And then you would write back and tell them that. And it would take about a year and you would probably have about a 5-minute conversation at that. But anyway, we're not here to talk about geeky pen pals. We're here to talk about Starlog magazine, founded in 1976. Now, as you can tell by the name, it was first designed to be a Star Trek fan magazine. That's how they got the name Starlog. But quickly, even from the first issue, it was more than just Star Trek. They covered everything. and they were one of the first magazines to talk about the upcoming film Star Wars. Now, this was the late 70s. I didn't really get into Starlog until probably the mid 80s. Before that, the only magazine I cared about was Mad Magazine. But when I became a teenager, getting more into movies, science fiction, pop culture, geek stuff as they call it, I don't really like saying that, but geek culture as they call it, I fell in love with Starlog magazine. Most people, when they hear about Starlog, they think, oh, that magazine that talked about science fiction movies, science fiction television shows, nerd stuff. But they covered all kinds of movies, not just Star Trek, Star Wars, The Last Starfighter. They did more than just science fiction. I mean, they would have articles about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, James Bond movies, Indiana Jones. If it was a big summer blockbuster movie, a franchise movie, or just a big blockbuster, they were going to cover it in Starlog. And what's so great about this, you got interviews with people that you just wouldn't see anywhere else. And maybe a few other magazines like Fangora. There was no place to get in-depth interviews of people from these movies that you loved. Like I said, like The Last Starfighter. The only really entertainment that you got was on Entertainment Tonight. And that was a small blur, maybe 30 seconds at most, during one of their broadcasts. But in Starlog, you got interviews with cast from Star Trek, Star Wars, Back to the Future. And I'm not just talking the main stars, they had them too, but they even had smaller characters, people you really didn't think you wanted to read an interview with until you read it. They even did an interview with Sebastian Shaw, who played Anakin Skywalker before the special editions. Well, I guess he still plays Anakin Skywalker without the mask on, just not the ghost part anymore. Yeah, interview with him, and it's a great read. How many of you have seen an interview with that guy? Not many for sure. And I believe Starlog really doesn't get the credit it deserves for starting this whole pop culture, geek culture, nerd culture, whatever you want to call it thing that's happening right now. There was a lot of fans of Starlog magazine that grew up to write, produce, and make science fiction and blockbuster films, or just films in general. Everyone talked about Star Wars or maybe aliens being a big influence on the pop culture, but Starlog magazine is a huge factor in this also. And again, I feel it gets overlooked. And that's kind of why I want to do this video. I kind of like to capture a record of stuff that influenced me and many people like me growing up. So even if I feel this video won't do as good as, say, an unreleased look at Buck Rogers figures or something like that, I just feel like I need to put it out there that Starlog needs to get a lot of the credit for the current pop culture we have today. I mean, now we have YouTube channels talking about movies and Marvel movies, Star Wars movies, Star Trek. We've got websites, we got Twitter, we got social media. But this is really all we had back during the heyday of magazines. Starlog, that was our Twitter, our YouTube, our Facebook, our social media was in Starlog magazine. The first issue that really grabbed my attention was in 1987, the 10th anniversary of Star Wars. This was amazing. This was a time when Star Wars was going through a dark period. You didn't get much content of Star Wars. And they have some incredible articles about the 10th anniversary of Star Wars, the making of Star Wars, and more in this issue. In fact, people ask me sometimes, where did you hear about that? Well, some of it comes from the 10th anniversary Star Wars Starlog edition. In fact, that magazine means so much to me. It hangs on my wall back there in the back of the junk room, if you can see it, framed up. If you get a chance, check it out. You'll really enjoy it. They even talk about the Star Wars Marvel comics and do some of the interviews with the creators of it. Like I said, they did interviews with people you just wouldn't get anywhere else. And I remember flipping through this magazine in the mid-80s and seeing something called Blake 7. It looked cheesy. It looked horrible. And every month or so, they would have an interview with someone from the show or someone producing the show or a director or somebody related to the show. Now, I remember one issue that had data on the cover. They had a Blake 7 episode guide. Still didn't know what Blake 7 was. Never heard of it. Never heard anyone else talk about it. So I started reading this episode guide. And to my surprise, I fell in love with this show before I saw it by just reading the episode guide. They would give a small outline of the plot for each episode, and they also gave a rundown to each character. And I loved the whole story of these outlaws fighting the Federation. You had a computer hacker. You had the rebel leader that wanted to fight the Federation at all costs. You had an alcoholic locksmith. You had a weapons expert. You had an all-knowing computer. You had the doctor of the crew. This was a great show, and by just reading these episodes, I was hooked. I needed more Blake 7. And that's when I found out my local PBS station would play it 11 o'clock Sunday nights. So I tuned in, and after I got past the cheesy special effects, fell in love with the story. Now, I've done some videos before about Blake 7. If you've never seen it, please check it out. The storylines are great. Again, the special effects are cheesy and cheap, but once you get into the whole story of the thing, you'll really love it, trust me. It is by far one of the best science fiction television shows ever made, and no one ever really talks about it. Another thing I really loved in Starlog magazine is that they had a little column of movies coming out. And I can remember reading this list because, again, this is before the internet. For a lot of us, we didn't know anything about these movies coming out until it hit that coming soon list in Starlog magazine. I remember it saying, Predator 2, The Hunt Continues. And I didn't know anything about a sequel to Predator. This was the first time I learned it. Now, I knew there was going to be a new Star Wars movie in 1999, but just seeing it there in print, Star Wars 1, and the coming soon list, whew, I just had to read it over and over again. And then there was movies you didn't even know what they were, but just the title alone made you intrigued enough where you wanted to learn more about it. Like The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. I'm sure I said that wrong, but that was just a crazy name. I had to learn more about it when Starlog did interviews with the cast and crew, just because I saw that little title in the coming soon section. I never really got into James Bond, but I remember seeing it there. James Bond, license revoked. Yes, a new James Bond movie called License Revoked was coming, and it boggled my mind. What? James Bond loses his license to kill? I have to check this out when it comes out, although I don't remember that one ever coming out. Maybe they meant License to Kill. Maybe they changed the name of it. But like I said, that coming soon section, small as it was a great thing to have in this magazine because many of us didn't know about these sequels or new movies coming out. And another thing that was really great, they had a lot of ads for stuff you just couldn't buy at your local Zayres or your Sears and Roebuck store, to movie posters, to very good looking masks from your favorite films, a lot of Star Wars stuff, t-shirts, Star Trek stuff, you name it, stuff you couldn't find at Kmart, you could get in this magazine. And half the fun was just looking at it, even if you weren't going to buy it. Just looking at some of this stuff for sale, knowing it's out there, and knowing there's other people like you that would love to buy this stuff was enough to make you happy just looking at the picture. Sadly, in the year 2007, there was a warehouse fire and every back issue of Starlog magazine and some other magazines were lost. But thanks to the internet, fans and collectors have uploaded back issues. You can read every issue, or close to it every issue, online. You can actually hit a button and flip through every page. So I'm going to put that link in the description below in case you want to go read some classic Starlog magazines and check out the 1987 10th anniversary issue of Star Wars. And then just flip up some random magazines and look at the coming soon list or some of the ads for things for sale. In April 2009, Starlog officially ended print. It was a sad day for movie fans, pop culture fans, geek fans, nerds, whatever you want to call us. Or just as I like to say, passionate pop culture fans. But even if the magazine is gone, Starlog still lives in the heart and soul of many of us that grew up reading this magazine. I want to thank you for watching this video, and maybe if you didn't know about Starlog magazine, maybe it piqued your interest where you'll go check out some of those back issues online. Or if you grew up with Starlog like I did, maybe it reconnected something that you forgot about. And you're thinking, hey, the Junkman's right. Or maybe you're thinking the Junkman's right. This magazine was a big influence on me. But until we talk again, please subscribe to the channel and hit thumbs up so I know you like my content. We'll be back very soon.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.